Welcome back to our Commerce Reimagined series. My name's Gemma Spence and I lead commerce transformation at VMLY&R Commerce, and I also lead the global commerce relationship at Colgate. Today, I'm delighted to have a sit down with the amazing and the visionary commerce leader, Diana Haussling. Diana is the VP and General Manager of Digital Commerce at Colgate North America, and she's here today to discuss how brands and businesses reorganize in order to drive success and profitability through digital commerce endeavors. How they organize in order to, create this culture of innovation and maximize both brand and business impact. So before we go into the details, I'd love to share a little bit more about Diana's background. Diana has 17 years of experience across integrated marketing, commercial development and turnaround across brands such as Hershey's, General Mills, Campbell's, and now Colgate. Diana manages a portfolio worth $4.6 billion, and she's led the charge on change making, helping build, scale, and craft high-performing businesses. Not only that, but Diana also believes that for businesses to really unlock their full potential, they need to focus on building and crafting a high-performing team through inspiring individuals. She is passionate about opening opportunities for her team and encouraging divergent thinking in order to drive a common purpose and goal. In her recent role as GM Digital Commerce at Colgate, she leads the North American e-commerce and direct-to-consumer strategies. She oversees the P&L and provides direction for digital commerce initiatives, e-commerce marketing, retail media, and D2C execution, as well as managing and focusing on cross-functional endeavors. On top of all of that, Diana has recently been named the prestigious Ad Aged 40 Under 40. She is a mother, she's based in New York City, and whilst we're meeting virtually today, I'm so looking forward to getting time in person very soon. Diana, we are thrilled to have you here today. Thanks again for joining us, and we're interested to hear your perspectives on how brands can capitalize digital commerce acceleration. But before we get into this, let's kick off with a short introduction from you in your own words around your role at Colgate, your career today, and the key motivations that you have to drive commerce acceleration.
Thank you so much, Gemma, and hopefully I can live up to the hype. So as the VP GM of Digital Commerce for Colgate-Palmolive, my primary focus and one of the biggest charges for my team is to be disruptors for good. And what that means is we're helping Colgate achieve its digital transformation goals. And that's not just limited to the digital space or the commerce space. It's really thinking holistically about how do we integrate this challenger, but also this digital mindset in everything we do, whether it's from package design to R&D and innovation, to our legal team, to how we think about and approach omni-commerce, and of course to retail media. We really are trying to rethink and reapproach how traditional CPGs think about this space. We're even pushing the envelope on how we approach the P&L so that it allows us the agility to shift funding and really be able to act in real time and allow for a very well-established CPG organization to flex its scale when needed, but also to operate like an entrepreneur at those right moments in time. For me, being a disruptor has been a part of my career my entire lifetime. I have the benefit of working for some awesome CPG brands. I play the CPG bingo game with a lot of folks. So I worked with Hershey, I worked for Campbell's, I worked for General Mills. And what all of these great brands have in common is that they have this connection, this loyalty, and also this proven value proposition that consumers can really get behind. So it's really fun to work with. And the beauty of the opportunities that it's presented me in my career is that I've been able to cross over from sales to marketing, to integrative marketing, and really have a breadth and depth of experience that allows me not only to partner and collaborate with my various cross-functional partners, but to really understand how to translate digital commerce in their spaces so we can grow together. So that's just a little about me and my background and experience.
Thank you, Diana. And I love the point around being a disruptor, because the reality is that, digital commerce is about managing change and managing transformation, because it's every day is a new day and a new foray, as technology and retailers continually evolve and adapt. I'd love to touch on the point around around structure and models, because they are so nuanced and they depend heavily on so many different complexities, whether it's around the business or the category maturity or the culture or the ambition for the business. I'd love to hear from you, like, how have you organized your business to capitalize on those nuances and the retail opportunities in the US? And do you see big differences between the brands based on their value proposition and also the commercial focus for the business?
So I love that question, because I really think that as organizations, how you structure, how you organize, how you align your teams can be a competitive advantage. So I'm not going to give away all my secret sauce, but what I will say is it's different for the organization and where you are on that maturity journey. So for me, I have a couple of key principles that I constantly think about when it comes to organization. And I say constantly because you consistently have to evolve as the environment around you changes. And as we are all living in these ever evolving times, we know the one thing that is always constant is change. So one of the things you really have to think about is, what are the things that you want to be really good at? What are those things, whether it's analytics or it's search, what are those skill sets that you want to put your mark on? And how do you design your organization around them? Are you self-aware about where you are in those pieces? And if you are not at a pace of heightened maturity, if you do not have the talent profiles that allow you to do it, that's where you may want to consider a center of excellence or consolidating that group. Then it's really understanding your culture. How are decisions made? How do you get things done? Is it a collaborative model? Is it a finance-driven model? Is it a marketing-driven model? Designing around the culture and not going against the current is a really easy way to drive transformation in a more accelerated way. And then you really have to think about the long-term goals of where you want to go and the steps to get there. So you may start off with a centralized model, then shift to a hybrid model in those critical areas that you want to upskill really quickly, and then eventually go to integration. And that cycle, as the evolution changes and the industry changes, you may have to start back over at scratch because it's never finished. But it's really about assessing the culture you're in, having real self-awareness about where your skill sets are, where your talent is, and then really designing for your end game. Where do you want to be in the next 5 to 10 years? And then having the flexibility and the self-awareness to know that you're going to have to tear that up, throw it out, and do it all again once the circumstances around you change.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And I love the point around agility and that flexibility, because, to your point, the job is never done. The game is always changing, and therefore, as a business, you're going to have to change in order to keep up and keep ahead of the competition. We can't have a conversation about digital commerce without talking about the hottest topic out at the moment, retail media. And given that, it's growing exponentially, some have quoted 82% year on year, the fact that retailers are doubling down on it because it's a profit and growth driver for their business. And, given that it's expected to be $1 trillion industry in its own right, we'd love your take on this subject. Tell me, how would you define retail media? How do you think about the metrics that really matter for a business? And how do you balance all of the different needs, whether it's about brand building and equity, whether it's around efficiency or effectiveness? And how do you tie that into achieving your commercial objectives within the business?
So that's a meaty question. So happy to get into it. So for me, retail media is really, I talk about my team being with Disruptors for Good. Well, retail media has flipped how we look at media on its head. And not just for the sake of the ability to be able to connect with consumers in a new way, but the ability to be able to connect with them, understand them, and delight them, because we have the data that allows us to do it in a way that is really personalized and unique to that consumer and the brand. And that's what really excites me. If I think about retail media in this space, what I see a lot of brands and a lot of retail media partners struggling with is trying to fit into the box. Well, retail media has created its own space and its own lane. It shouldn't be compared to traditional media elements, and it shouldn't be compared to the shopper marketing elements of the past. This is a new opportunity and a new space for us as an industry to influence and rethink how we approach media in this dynamic. For me, that really comes down to understanding and really getting to the heart of the jobs to be done. Oftentimes, I think that brands and sometimes our retail media partners like to start with the tactics. You know, they have this new innovation, this new tech stack. Here's a cool tactic you could execute. But really, if we take a step back and layer in some of those traditional marketing models that have worked for us in the past and really define the strategy, define the job to be done, then we can really figure out how to use not only our traditional media levers, but the retail media levers to serve that end. So defining that job to be done is critical. Then we have to rethink KPIs. So typically in this space, and especially in the digital media space, everybody talks about ROAS. It's that the safety blanket. It's the KPI that we all feel comfortable with. And for those of us that are newer to digital commerce, it's the one thing that we kind of get. Well, the ROAS is not always going to be the end all be all. So defining a KPI hierarchy and really working with your retail media partners and your agency partners to help you define that hierarchy of KPIs. Sometimes it's going to be ROAS, but sometimes when you're driving growth for the category or you're launching innovation, ROAS may not be your number one KPI, but it actually may just be a threshold. And you may be looking at other things like driving traffic, penetration. So there's really an opportunity for us to rethink the KPIs. I think another critical element for retail media, as we think about both the commerce and the brand equity components of it, is those things don't need to be mutually exclusive. From a commerce standpoint, there's basic hygiene that we have to execute. We need search. We need our content and our PDP pages. We need to make sure our brands are showing up, because the physical shelf is important, but the digital shelf has now become our new packaging, and that's critical as well too. We also need to make sure we're thinking through and mindful of those sales targets. So as you're thinking about content, is it conversion driving content versus romance content? So it's really important to delineate between what is needed to drive conversion. But then there's also a huge opportunity for us to leverage retail media as part of our overall brand campaigns. And this is where I think, so for all of you retail media partners, I really start to think about how you leverage agency relationships and really understand how brand campaigns are built. Because right now, there is a little bit of a separation between the commerce and equity piece. And that doesn't need to be the case. And I do think as we really unlock the value of retail media, you'll see more and more media to shelf campaigns come to life that leverage the best of brand building and equity building all the way through to commerce.
Thank you, Diana. And I love the articulation there about kind of media to shelf, brand to demand, you know, the idea of conversion and romance. It's and I think you're, you know, absolutely right that the way to do this is to break out of those silos and to start connecting all the different aspects, which I think leads really nicely to the next point, which is all around how to connect those dots across the walled gardens, right? Because these retailers are, you know, fundamentally media owners in their own right. They have, you know, their own auctions and algorithms. You know, they are defining the attribution and success metrics. As a brand, how are you connecting those dots? How are you pulling together conflicting attribution to really measure what is effective and what is not?
Well, first I would say, you know, as a brand, you have no choice because the consumers have made this choice for us. They blew up the funnel They're coming in and out of it. They're dropping in and converting. They're, engaging and driving loyalty. So you really have no choice but to connect the dots. But I think the best way to do that, and we've seen that with a lot of the partnerships that our retail media partners have engaged in, whether it's with the trade desk or even with some of our various vendor partners that have enabled us to be able to connect those dots across the board. Now, I think what's critical, and that's where the structure piece comes into play, is really being able to define what we're trying to connect and what we're trying to accomplish, what our KPIs are from a brand equity perspective, who are the audiences that we're going after, and how do we not only pull them all the way through to commerce, but then re-engage them and build loyalty. I think the more and more we start talking about 1P data, but then also start talking about engagement and loyalty, we sometimes lose that there's an opportunity for us to build these long-term relationships with consumers, and media can play a critical role in allowing us to do that. So how you define those audiences, how you think about the lifetime value in those audiences, and how you listen to them and engage them at the right moments in time and bring them through to conversion where it matters, but then also give them an opportunity to connect with your brand is really critical. So for me, a lot of the work that we do is very much so closely linked with our agency partners. And we do a lot of work to not only think about the audiences we want to go after, but also how do we examine and take the data that we're getting from our retail media partners and the data that we get from some traditional methodologies like marketing mix to help us to continuously refine. This is definitely a hands-on keys operation. There is no set it and forget it, and it's something that we have to do consistently. The other thing that we found is as you're executing tentpole events, having that knowledge going into the tentpole event to prepare yourself, but prepare your consumers for what's to come, but also taking that knowledge and refining it on the way out is how you create sustainable and incremental growth.
I think that it's really interesting to hear you talk about the importance of data and how to unlock the key insights and the key use cases that can help grow your share, and you can then use from a competitive or conquesting standpoint within your kind of retail media endeavors. I'd love to just spend a couple of minutes on budgeting considerations, because you will have every Tom, Dick, and Harry from a media and from a digital commerce standpoint coming with cap in hand to you asking for media dollars or for commerce dollars. I think it would be really interesting to learn, your key considerations for both top down but also bottom up investment allocation principles, and how do you prioritize? What do you prioritize, and what has to take a back seat?
Yeah, I think from a starting point, there's just basic brand health that has to be maintained. So you need to have your content and your organic search needs to be running for you. Then you need to have a search strategy. These are just basic things. In the past, it used to be like, we're only going to do this with our priority retailers. Now, as consumers are becoming more promiscuous and they're shopping various modes, if you are not showing up on the digital shelf, then you are not existing for that consumer. So it's important first from a baseline that you maintain that basic, brand health across the board. Then when it comes to, other opportunities, other jobs to be done that you're trying to execute, we've worked very closely with our agency partner to make sure we define that rubric of success. So what platform, what algorithm does what, and how should we best leverage them to do that job? And really having an understanding of, what you're trying to accomplish and what you can accomplish on the various platforms, I think is critical. Going back to basics too, around your retailer segmentation and understanding what retailers are important and what retailers are going to drive a good portion of your business is also very critical. But then there's also the job to be done. So if you're going after a specific consumer base and they're shopping at one retailer, then it's going to be important that you show up there. I think the other critical aspect of this, which is why it's such a collaborative process, is you are also working arm in arm with your retailer partners on growing that shared business. I think the biggest opportunity for all of us is to not think about shifting shoppers from digital or shifting them to brick and mortar, but really, how do we make the pie bigger? How do we delight them so that they're buying our products more frequently, that we're giving them more reasons to use it, and that we're helping our retailer partners achieve their goals as well too. That's how we get to the win-win for everyone in this space. That does mean, though, that you have to make choices. As I look at our competitive environment in a digital commerce landscape, the consumer is really dictating what those competitors are. It's not like you go into the aisle and the buyer defines it. It's now in the control of the consumers. That means it may cost you more in order to win. So you're going to have to make choices. And there are some brands that you may have to say, you know what, that's not a brand we're going to invest heavily in. We're going to maintain that brand. And these are the brands that we're going to have to grow. The nuance and the strategic work of really defining that, having a very clear vision and providing that direction to your SMEs, that is the critical role leaders, marketers, and sales leadership plays in ensuring that not only are you able to invest to win, but you actually have the funds to do so.
A curveball question that I would love to just ask your views and perspectives on. So as you know, within VMLY&R Commerce, we've been heavily focused around creative commerce. Beth Ann Kamenko was the jury president this year, helping to redefine the category as a whole. And what we've seen from many of our retail partners is this refocus and renaissance of creativity. Where do you see creativity playing the biggest part for your business? And do you see, as the proliferation of new channels comes to the fore, it becoming a kind of strategic driver for your business?
Yeah, so there's a couple of elements in the way that I look at the creative. So especially in this environment, in a digital commerce environment where consumers don't have that same tactile sensation that they do when they meander around, the physical store, how you create that and how you're able to really give them that sensation and understanding of the product not only builds that loyalty and that connection to the product, but it also solves the problem of having bad reviews, which hurt your algorithm to begin with. So there's creativity from an emotional, romantic standpoint that is critical, but also from a functional and tactical standpoint that one has to master. New creators are really going to be able to harness not only the medium itself, but the ability to really connect with consumers on all of those levels so that they can make those decisions that they were making in a store by really physically picking up a product, turning it around, understanding it, and being able to interact with it. There's another element of creative that I know you're not necessarily speaking to in this question, but it's really around how we think about solving problems. So whether it is a ratings and review issue, or it is, a challenge that you're having on your platform where consumers are not really understanding how to necessarily use your product effectively. Creative plays such a critical role in that, that I just think we're at unlocking, we're at the tip of, of our creative teams really being able to do some awesome things. And as we look at Web3 and the metaverse, there's even going to be even more opportunities for us to be able to, can make that connection point between creative and that human experience. So that's really exciting to me. And I think we're only going to see that space evolve. And we're going to have to solve for some of those very unsexy technical elements that consumers are used to and that they crave from that physical environment. We were all on lockdown for a while, and there's a lot of just elements of physical, Gemma, I haven't even gotten to meet you in person yet. So there's all these elements of the physical that we need to solve for, and creative can play a critical role in that.
Absolutely. And I think that it's I thought that the way that you kind of articulated the whole creative thinking, and you know, I hate using the out of the box thinking as a term of phrase, but really, you know, being able to take rudimentary problems and, you know, unpick or unpack them in unique and different ways, I think is going to be really important. And, you know, the whole premise of taking your distinctive assets as a brand and being able to use them in unique and inspiring ways that help them really stand out from any shelf. And the shelf doesn't necessarily have to be physical or digital, it can be anywhere, right?
Well, and how do you take those learnings back? So like we're leveraging a lot of the learnings that we're getting from the digital shelf and actually using them to influence our package design. And so that's that phygital world and all those things emerging. That's what really I think is going to be exciting for us going forward in this industry.
And I think that it's a really nice segue, as you touched on, you know, metaverse and sustainability and circular economy, to think about innovation. So, you know, innovation doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily about brand new products or, you know, new routes to consumer. It could be, to your point, around the brilliant basics and actually taking some of those core ideas and concepts that are very human and that drives excitement and, you know, kind of instant gratification into different mediums and different environments. You know, what we see is that many brands, you know, they are, how would I say, drinking from the innovation fire hose. You know, whether that's things like, you know, to your point around metaverse or addressable digital displays or AR, VR, quick commerce, those sorts of things, you know. And how do you ruthlessly prioritize? You know, what do you say, yes, we need to do it today, and other things that you say, not no, but not now?
Yeah, the approach that I take, because you could test your and learn yourself to death, is really to first establish, you know, what are our test and learn criteria? And I think, you know, because you do have, and I'm one of those people that can geek out in my space and get really excited about all of these cool things, but does it actually, you know, to what end does it help us? So I think really having that, hey, when are we test and learning? What is the criteria that determines a test and learn? And then how do you know when it's successful? And how does it shift from a test and learn to beyond, where you're actually putting it into practice? So establishing that before that cool thing, that shiny toy that you have to have gets in front of you, is really important, so that your teams, you know, really have, you know, something to ground them on. I think the second piece for me is not just letting what hasn't been tried in your organization be the driver for test and learn. You know, I often use that, and this is horrible English, but that's been learned already. We don't need to test it. Somebody else did that for us. So let's go ahead and let them be the first mover, and we can just adopt. We don't need to take a test and learn approach because we've seen it. So making sure that you're not short-sighted and only looking at what's new to your organization, you're actually benefiting from what's happening and being curious around you. And so that's really important. And I think the last piece for me that is critical is how you partner with either vendors, retail media partners. How are you partnering with folks so that you're influencing the tech stack? You're influencing the technology that comes out. That's an easy way to determine that you will be all in on a test and learn or innovation, because you're a part of it and it's solving a unique problem that either your company has or your consumer is facing. And you're working with a company, a vendor partner, an organization that has the capability of helping you solve that problem. So, you know, it's not very fancy, it's not sexy, but that's the approach that we take as a team. And sometimes, you know, it's a bust, and that's okay. And having the teams feel that a test and learn is exactly that. And if it fails, that's okay. And let's talk about that failure so we can apply it to the next test and learn and maybe have a different outcome.
To the point around innovation, you know, how do you go about proving the value of innovation within your organization?
You know, and that's where that exercise of really defining the business challenges that you have, as boring as it sounds, can really be the guidepost. It makes it very easy for everyone around the room, whether or not they're very in-depth knowledge in your space is there or not, to be able to nod their heads and say, yes, that makes sense, let's do this, because this is the problem that we're trying to solve for, and here is the business solution that it's best in breed that's going to allow us to solve that problem. So that work of defining those business challenges is critical. I think there's another element of, what's the benefit, and really having that understanding of that cost ratio of the benefit and the resources that are required to do the innovation. It could be cool, it could be awesome, but the amount of resources and the drain that it might put on your system may not make it the right fit or the right thing for you at that time. So being able to evaluate these things, but do it quickly, is really how you allow yourself the ability to not only execute and leverage innovation, but really make it work hard for your organization. And I think the last piece that is very critical is to empower the subject matter experts to make the decisions. Sometimes, and a lot of our partners, they want to talk to the person with the titles. Titles don't always mean that we exactly know of the right solution. So putting the decision in the hands of the right people, empowering them to make the call, and really listening to them and trusting them and letting them move. I look at my job and I remove barriers, so the really smart people who are much smarter than me that are on my team can kill it in their day job, day in and day out. And that's, I think, the fastest way to get the most out of innovation.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And I think that taking the methodology around Agile and putting it into practice is absolutely critical to win within these AI-driven retail partners / media owners. It's the only way to go. One final question for me. So if you were a betting gal, what would be your key innovations across the e-commerce and digital commerce value chain that you would be 100% backing?
Supply chain efficiencies, especially when it comes to picking, packing, and sorting. If I look at the explosion of digital commerce and our business models, whether you're on the retail or the manufacturer side, we were primarily focused on a brick and mortar model. And so as we're shifting and our mix of our spend is shifting, it is a more expensive model. And we're feeling that pain not only from a retailer side, but a manufacturer side. And with the inflationary challenges that we're facing today, I think all of that pressure is going to push solutions and solve for distribution challenges and the cost that are really coming from a supply chain perspective, specifically around digital commerce. And you'll see this come to light in package design, in AI and automation that happens, in distribution centers, but even the simplicity of how we're leveraging stores for distribution centers and what that looks like. I do think, it's not at the forefront of what consumers may feel, but the impact of the efficiency and the cost reductions, the sustainability challenges and the pressures and that it will alleviate on our environment are going to be ones that, at the end of the day, consumers will be excited about, but more importantly, for retailers and manufacturers, it will allow them to control costs. So that push and the opportunity to expand margins, I really do think is going to drive innovation.
It goes back to your point about being win-win, right? It's a win-win all round, consumer, brand, retailer. So it's I think it's going to impact, all aspects of how businesses go to market. Diana, thank you so much for your time today. It has been an absolute pleasure listening to your tips and your helpful tricks about how to organize and drive success through digital commerce. I think it's very clear, you're building an incredible team and sustainable strategy in order to drive share, contribution and penetration within Colgate. We're going to have to get back together in the future to get under the skin of how your strategy is coming to the fore. It's been a pleasure to listen to you, and thank you for sharing your valuable feedback for our viewers and listeners today.
Well, thank you so much for having me and lending your platform. But more importantly, thank you for being a partner that pushes and also disrupts us for good.